by my father. I remember as a child, I would make castles in the sand. And anything that I dreamt of, if I wanted to see my Prince Charming, somehow it would formulate with the clouds. Up there was where my dreams and my vision would be and my ambition. And then down here was when I would make this real in the sand I formulated with my hands. Somehow I was a girl who was very much on daydreaming.
I looked up and she was there, and I thought she was the most beautiful thing I ever saw. She reminded me of the Virgin Mary. Long hair, beautiful face. That's how I remember it, having met her.
This is the Philippines, December 26, 1941. Jap bombers are coming.
Let's go back 400 years to 1521. Spaniards ran the Philippines for 3 centuries.
4 decades after the Philippines were annexed by the United States following the Spanish-American War.
For the past 40 years, Filipinos shared Uncle Sam with Americans.
This was Manila's punishment for being an American city. We lost the Philippines.
And in the place of the Americans who had governed with justice came the Japanese, who governed by the sword and offered nothing but slavery.
We were first year high school. We would go to school barefooted because there was mud on the street. We would just clean our feet there when we reached school. And then Imelda's dresses were made of parachutes, bed sheets during the war. She did not complain. She liked it. At least she had a new dress.
Marcos. This was Ferdinand and my quarters. It could be set up, exclusively, just in privacy. Somehow, I had my own bedroom and he had his own bedroom. Like, for instance, this one is his bedroom, but we were always together. We always slept together, but we would sometimes be there or here, but we were always together. And this was somehow the looks of my bedroom also. Again, it was always a bed for two. Somehow President Marcos and myself, wanted to see each other the next morning, like we were going on a date again.
She was very shy to start with, and she would lock herself up in her room. I don't think she liked the idea that he had other women. She knew she was beautiful. I mean, she couldn't understand the fact that her husband was a roving eye.
Pilyo talaga, pilyo, pero sa lahat ng never had a mistress. You know what I mean by mistress? Yung kept, ganyan, ganito, hindi. Never. Hindi siya ganun eh. Madaming good time, pero hindi mistress.
Politics.
On a rainy day in Washington, pomp and ceremony attend the formal reception of Philippine President Ferdinand E. Marcos and his wife.
When Marcos took over in 1966, he looked pretty damn good to Lyndon Johnson. He was one of the Democrats of Asia when there were very few at that time.
The Americans had always been involved in Philippine politics. Remember, we were a colony for about 45 years. Before we gained independence in 1946, we had to sign a military basing agreement with them, which would allow them to station the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Navy ships in the Philippines in two very large bases, the largest bases outside the continental U.S., larger than Pearl Harbor. He knew how to play the basis card very, very well. He knew what the Americans wanted, and he tested how far he could push the envelope on his relationship with them, which he did. Boy, oh boy, oh boy, did he get a lot of money from the Americans in return.
The opening of the new Metropolitan Opera House at New York's Lincoln Center is attended by President and Mrs. Marcos as the guests of Mrs. Johnson.
The most glamorous opera occasion since the Old Met opened in 1883.
The American media went to town portraying them as the John F. Kennedy and the Jacqueline Kennedy of the Philippines, who were going to build some kind of Philippine Commonwealth. The myth really was kind of powerful, and it struck people that way.
When Marcos became president, and I asked him, Ferdinand, now that you are president, I said to him, what is my role as First Lady? And he said, as president, I'll be the father of the country. I'll establish a strong house for the Filipino people. I'll build a strong house for the Filipino people, and you make it a home. So I reflected, what makes a home? Love. What is love when made real? Beauty. Culture. There was a crisis of identity. Who were we? Were we Japanese? Were we Americans? Were we Spanish? So I said, I'll build the cultural center of the Philippines to be the sanctuary of the Filipino soul and the monument to the Filipino spirit.
Well, I was one of those who rallied against the building of the cultural center, basically because the cultural center is just one big building that tried to compete with the Lincoln Center and other first world edifices of centers of culture. The Philippines certainly is not first world and couldn't afford such a building. And most of the things were irrelevant to suffering in the slum areas.
Apparently, the greater majority were thinking of a very mediocre foundation on just thinking on the palliatives, on the superficial thing of fixing up housing, all this, which we did attended to it later on.
Elections, he outspent us something like 100 to 1, 200 to 1. It is hard to judge exactly how popular he was because he completely dominated the scene through money.
1969 was one of the dirtiest and most fraudulent elections we've ever had until then.
I think riots are here to stay. The ills of this country are great. They stem from the economic situation, from the mismanagement of government, but from the alienation of youth. Now that is the root cause.
So I come to speak of a society that is sick. We must act, we must change, and we must do so now.
Over that period, from 1970 to 1972, the image of Marcos plunged. Constitutionally, he could only hold 2 terms. But even if he could run in 1973, there was really no way he could win.
As of the 21st of this month, I signed Proclamation number 1081, placing the entire Philippines under martial law.
He informed the family very formally, and he called the little children. He said, the time has come. What we have to offer for the survival of our country is not only life, but more than that, honor. Because people will suspect or might say, oh, he just proclaimed martial law to extend his stay and extend his stay in power. No, it was the risk of his honor and his reputation, because he was so democratically committed.
Abolished both houses of Congress and placed the courts under his control, closed down all radio and television stations and all newspapers.
When Marcos declared martial law, it was the greatest time that I can remember in this country. Everybody had discipline, everybody followed what they were told to do.
Marcos wants to stay in power as long as he can. And they did succeed. They were there for 18 years.
The normal flow of life continues. Everyday problems confront them as before, but they are no longer scared nor stifled in their movement. Fear is no longer a dark cloud over their heads, and life goes on.
Marcos had the fetish for the number 7 and multiples of 7. Martial law actually was declared in September 23. He changed it to September 21 because he was scared of any number that wasn't a multiple of 7.
It was a beautiful afternoon in December. It was December 7.
The date was auspicious enough. It was the 7th day of December, in the 7th year of President Marcos's administration, and the 77th day after the proclamation of martial law.
We are gathered here this afternoon to celebrate beauty and cleanliness. When we bring the sparkle of cleanliness to our community,
We were giving awards, and suddenly there was a man with a dark suit and had a bolo right inside his sleeve. That fraction of a second, oh God, I said, if there's somebody who's going to kill me, why do they have to, Lord, why is it to be a bolo that is so ugly? It should have been such I wish they put some kind of a yellow ribbon or some kind of a nice thing with this kind of an ugly instrument. Why such an ugly instrument to kill me? I said. Anyway, I was still joking at that point. In fact, when this man was hitting me with this bolo, I looked around. I said, I wonder whom he is about to kill. Little did I know that was going to me. He came in closer and closer until, it's me. I did not feel any pain yet, and that I had all these 11 cuts. Eventually, this one here, and all of this was cut off, dangling. I was going to have plastic surgery so that the scars would not show. And Mark said, no, don't touch it. Don't have this plastic surgery because it is your badge of courage, he said. There was absolutely no reason why I could have escaped that assassin. And I said to myself, Maybe the Lord saved my life because I was pretty generous in the giving, in the serving, in the caring for my fellow men. And since the Lord had given me a second chance, I'm not only going to be excessively giving and serving and caring and extravagantly doing things for others, but I'm going to be selfless. I'll give it all. From then on, it was my most productive years.
The government has boldly dramatized commitment to its citizenry with the creation of the Ministry of Human Settlement under the leadership of Mrs. Imelda Marcos.
There was a lot you could justify as being Minister of Human Settlement, for example, in construction of roads, housing, environment, social welfare, etc. No? So she expanded the influence of her ministry.
Water, power, food, shelter, clothing, medical service, education, ecological balance, sports, recreation, livelihood programs, roads, bridges, communication, and the like. I built the Philippine Design Center, then the Folk Art Theater, then we had the Philippine Convention Center. I am sensitive enough to put my ears, my total being, to the feelings of people. The people dictate, and I am able to hear loudly the dictates of the people.
Knock down the whole thing there behind, and then knock down all the houses there in the guest house. It was already finished.
The architect's still in the hospital because
And then we have another $100 million to play around with.
The cultural center, the heart center, the kidney center, the lung center. The opposition said she had an edifice complex.
These were not things for the everyday person. They didn't go. The people who she felt really loved her and said really loved her were not the people who attended symphonies and ballets or got special care at heart centers.
One of the things that she did, which was quite impressive, she went against the Catholic Church and instituted a very strong population control program, distributing condoms and reproductive education, and she actually managed to lower the birth rate considerably.
She asked me if I could whip up something for her, and I did, and it was okay. And from then on, she started ordering loads and loads of things from me. My atelier, which was a two-story affair, they were literally filled with the frames of embroidery that these women were working on, because it takes forever to do this hand embroidery.
It is not expensive to be beautiful. It takes only a little effort to be presentable and beautiful. But it takes some effort and E for effort. And unfortunately, people think of beauty as luxury, beauty as frivolity. No, or extravagance. Beauty is a discipline. Beauty is art, is harmony in the ideological sense. And in the theological sense, beauty is God and love made real.
She would give me such short notice. They would work with me for 24 hours, practically. I can say that so many women got blind, doing the embroidery for the things that I did for her.
And the ultimate reach in this world is beauty.
I was very nationalistic and I was thinking, I'm not doing this just for her. I'm doing this for the whole country. So she is well appreciated abroad.
I remember when I was a little girl, and I was always asked to meet with VIPs in the province. And for days on end, we were ironing our dresses and shining our shoes. And then suddenly, the VIP comes in, and she wears a faded dress, and then she wears a shoes that might have seen better days, you know. Later on, when I became First Lady, I would be meeting with kings or queens. It would take me an hour to dress up. But when I go to the provinces, it would take me an hour and a half or two. Double the time, because they need a standard, they need a role model, they need a star, especially in the dark of the night. So when they would ask me, Mrs. Marcos, as First Lady, what was your role? I said, I had to be both star and slave. I had to be a star for these poor people, and at the same time, I have to be slave. I had to enslave myself that everybody becomes a star.
Imelda had this thing about looking beautiful because she said that she was representing the people. It sounded to me so convoluted because she was representing a people who were so unglamorous, so unfree.
You just have to weigh this glamour with the human rights abuses, with the corruption.
Here now at the front page headlines. Mrs. Marcos left this
The
morning.
media was painting entirely different pictures to show their pomp and circumstance. And everything was happening underneath. People were suffering. There was tremendous poverty. There was tremendous violence all over the place. But just some kind of invisible reality. It took 14 years for that reality to catch up in 1986.
The Marcoses created a condition for peaceful people suddenly to seek other options.
Because they felt that there was no more avenue for peaceful change.
Aguinaldo, Bicutan, Crame, Bonifacio. Those are the camps, the military camps where political prisoners were detained.
We never had such a violation of human rights. In fact, we have no human rights case here in the Philippines, even to this day.
Oh, she cannot face reality. She cannot face reality. For heaven's sake, I was saying Mass in Bicutan for 5 years because it was all filled with political prisoners, completely.
You're looking at something like 70,000 political detainees total. At any one time, they had as many as 19,000 in various stockades and military detention camps all over the country.
There was at that time an anti-subversion law. So anyone who was against the Marcos or at any time in the past criticized the government in writing or in public speaking was considered a subversive. I was a punching bag for several hours. At some point, they made me lie down between two beds. They call this hanging in air torture. They usually would kick me in the stomach and then order me to do this, to go back up, no? And the whole day there was more of the same, more of the torture.
I stayed for a year in prison. Nobody knew where we were for about 8 days or more. Absolutely nobody. You just stayed in prison for as long as they wanted you to stay inside. Yeah, no charge, no trial, no nothing.
The more powerful she gets.
She had these bizarre all-night singing and dancing parties at Malacanang and on their yacht and in New York.
Can't give you anything but love. Imelda, that's the...
She made people sit around watching these endless films of herself and the Pope.
She considered herself a representative of the poor because the poor Filipinos experienced life through her. When she lived well, they felt good. She told me that on several occasions, told my wife that as well.
Well, my mother, that's the way she is. She's flamboyant. There are people who sit in the corner, there are people who are the life of the party. My mother's the life of the party. She can't help that. And why should she?
We won't give you anything but love.
Every time I would go get things like paintings, I would think of paintings for a museum. Like, for instance, in this book, we have all the Italian masters from the Sienese to the Renaissance, the great masters from Filippino Lippi to Botticelli to Titian to Magnasco to Raphael to Canalettos. These are Canalettos. Big murals of Canaletto. This is Tiepolo, and this is Tiepolo. And all the major painters of this period, over 148, 50, lots of them. This Botticelli alone cost $25 million. They called me imeldific, and meaning excessive, extravagant, wasteful. And when they asked me, are you imeldific? Are you all this? I said, in a material world, when you're committed to God, beauty, and love, you can be mistaken as imeldific, meaning wasteful. Like if you put incense, flowers, candles, because you're a believer, to the altar of your God. For the non-believer, that's a waste and a frivolity. Just like when you see a beautiful woman, you cannot say, hi, look, she is 32% beautiful. You cannot quantify beauty. You cannot quantify love. I seem to be able only to see the positive things in life and the beautiful things in life. And when I see, for instance, garbage or ugliness, so then I turn my back, or I seem to be able to skip it. This was the Romualdez home. And this is where I practically grew up.
The house is actually much different than where Imelda grew up. It sort of has this dual purpose. It's a shrine to both Imelda and Jesus at the same time. One of its main features is 18 dioramas describing Imelda's version of her own life, with each diorama showing a chapter.
Welcome to Santorini Shrine. The center is the chapel area beside our guest rooms with different motifs. The center is our patron saint here in Tacloban. That is Santo Niño, and that is made of ivory from Italy. So all salad sets here are King Louis style from Europe. And this is Imelda's room. The walling here is hand-painted, hand-embroidered. The walling here is made of leather, Italian leather.
She decided that Manila would host the Manila International Film Festival to rival Cannes and Venice and Toronto and that kind of thing. And they built a film palace in Manila, the Manila Film Center.
And because they were rushing it, you know, they had shifts of people working on a 24-hour basis.
They were pouring cement after pouring second layers and third layers without waiting for the first layer to settle and harden. So it so happened that the scaffolding collapsed, and about, I don't know, between 18 to 36 bodies were buried there, but she said, well, they're there, they're encased in concrete, finish it.
The attack on Mrs. Marcos was that in my hurry to build things very fast, I just left the dead there, which was a big lie. Immediately get every piece of debris and found 4. And we did not stop until we got each and every one of them, and each and every one's family was compensated.
To this day, they say that those souls haunt the building because you have all these strange sounds.
Nobody wishes to even occupy the film center because of the spirits that haunt the place. So you do have some buried bodies over there.
Towards a human order. When we talk about development, we talk about the development of the whole man in body, in mind, and in spirit. Feed the body with what is good, like in the old Trinity, to make it healthy. Towards a human order. When we talk about development, we talk about the development of the whole man in body, in mind, and in spirit. Feed the body with what is good, like in the old Trinity, to make it healthy. Feed the mind with truth, to make it literate. Feed the spirit with beauty, so that it will have dignity. Only when the body is healthy, literate, and with dignity can it be whole and grow and can even smile. But take out one of this. You put eyes too and mouth. It looks like a Pac-Man.
Well, it's very esoteric, existential philosophy, really. When you simplify these things, they sound like weird. But if you try to draw pictures of any philosophical system, it will sound insane.
And a face that is happy always looks like a heart. A sad face is an upside down heart. But put this together, it's the symbol for peace. That's the symbol for peace, an upside down heart and an upright heart.
When she has an idea, it is people around her that begin to make it sound the best idea in the world. Of course, it was not the best idea most of the time, but then because they want to be looking so good to Mrs. Marcos, so they tell her, oh, that's a great idea.
I wish they were just, more truthful and be a real friend to her than just praising her all the time. It brought her down in so many ways.
7 portals to peace and order. Number 1, when you ask a child in its purity to draw a tree, it draws 0 and 1 is equals to ecological border. 1 woman and 1 man, you have a human order.
A most drastic. A most dramatic aspect of the new society is the respected place that the Philippines has gained in the Assembly of Nations. In the past, Philippine foreign policy served merely as a reflection of the country's special relations with the United States.
Let me give you a few names. Saddam Hussein, Mao Zedong, Deng Xiaoping, Richard Nixon, Andre Gromyko, Fidel Castro, Doris Duke. What have you read in the press and seen on television about them? Have they not all been pictured at one time or another as ugly creatures to be avoided as monsters? How did they become our friends? Because we offered nothing more than the true, the good, and the beautiful. We offered peace.
Mrs. Marcos left this morning, accompanied by an official party that included stewards and secretaries.
She wanted to project that image of the Filipino. We all know that maybe 50 or 40 years ago, some people in Europe still thought we lived on trees. I guess she wanted to change that very image.
In the Philippines, it is said that the birth of humanity came about when a divine intent split a single bamboo and from...
She contributed in her own way. She negatively or positively placed the Philippines in the map because it was being discovered that there is this first lady who would go around and do some diplomatic work, ex officio ambassador.
My mother somehow always could find a connection. She's very good at that. She's so instinctive. She has a very deft touch with people. It doesn't surprise anyone who's seen her in action that she was the one sent out by my father for the more delicate trips.
For me, the most interesting trips were the ones to Libya, where we went to beard the lion in his den, who was Gaddafi.
Her purpose was basically to convince Gaddafi to stop shipping arms to the Muslim separatists in the Philippines.
It was Gaddafi who came to see me. And when he saw me, he said, Mrs. Marcos, I like you. I said, why, Mr. President? Well, I like you. You're a courageous woman. And then he said, why don't you become Muslim? I said, Mr. President, it will be very difficult to teach old dogs new tricks. I've been a Catholic all my life. I don't even know how to read the Quran. He said, I'll teach you. And he would underline, Islam is peace, Islam is generous, Islam is kind, Islam is compassionate. And when the time came for the negotiations were being done and the formal agreement was being made, there was argument about the ceasefire. So I said, Mr. President, but Islam is peace. And so I am coming here for peace. And Islam is peace. And I just read it as you taught me in the Quran, peace. Okay, okay. I said, so agreed. So that was my main mission. Women's very often is not taken seriously. But Marcos was smart enough to know that if I made a mistake, he could always change his mind and he can be more flexible. So at first impact, the big hardy leaders, oh, this is easy, negotiation. And they kept their defenses down. It was really better in the end because we could talk more or less human beings, like instead of thinking in a rational, logical way, and that got things all complicated and muddled up. And in the end, we were talking like humans.
She did have a level of excess in Washington that was, to put it mildly, unusual. This was largely because she was viewed, rightly, as a figure of some influence and power in the Philippines. She was accountable to no one, including really not accountable to her husband.
She was very aggressive in pushing for a high-level set of meetings. And remember, she also had positions in her own right. She was the Minister of Human Settlements and Governor of Metro Manila. She controlled something like 15% of the budget.
Imelda Marcos is now one of the 10 richest women in the world, and she is one of a handful who has real power. In public, she denies ever